secrecy a core component of being addicted to pornography?
I would say no.
I would say it depends though.
I think the secretive piece is an indicator that there is a problem, perhaps. But I would say that we all have worked with addicts of whatever substance that use that substance openly, and it's addictive also.
Right.
Yeah.
But that
So
speaks
I
to
would-
shame. If I'm hiding something, it means I'm ashamed of it, which means there's probably part of me that thinks this has gotten out of my control, or I feel somehow like I shouldn't be
Or
doing
against
it
my
at
values.
all, or against my values, or yeah.
But there's also porn addicts that we've worked with who are sort of openly using
Yeah.
and still struggle to stop, have tried, been unable, it's become chaotic, et cetera, et
I
cetera.
think the secrecy is often an indicator that there's something problematic, which may be addiction. But like you said, just because you're not being secret about it doesn't mean that there isn't an addiction going on with it all the same.
Can we just say though, because this is where it gets complicated, because it might not be, people want to say, well, how much porn am I looking at where it becomes addictive? Is it, or what type of porn am I looking at? Like, it's not necessarily those things. It could certainly be, but, I guess if it gets to the point where I'm injuring my body or my genitals because I'm masturbating for so long, or, it's interfered with my relationships or my occupational functioning, job or school or something, it's got to cause negative consequences for
Yeah.
self or others. I mean,
Well,
I
and
think
then
that's when we know it's a problem.
there's also an age thing. I mean, guys or women who are younger are going to probably be masturbating and being sort of like sexual with themselves more frequently than somebody who's older. And if I've got somebody in their 60s who's being sexual at that rate, usually there's something else connected to it.
Hmm.
There's also the piece, and I will just throw this out, that I assume you've all had this where I've had people come in and, it's like, well, how often are you looking at porn, or how often are you masturbating? I'm like, oh, about average. And then, you just learn to ask the question, well, how much is average for you? And, sometimes you get, oh, like once or twice a month. I'm like, okay. But then you also get the people that are like, like 4, 5, 6 times a day. I'm like, oh, that's average for you.
Yeah.
Just for the
That's
audience
an
out there, if
example
your answer
of-
is 4 or 5, 6 times a day, there's an addiction going on.
And that's an example of a person not knowing
Yeah.
what might be because they've normalized the behavior, or they grew up in a situation where it was normalized behavior. So therefore they don't know that that might be an indicator of a problem. And so back to the secrecy thing, right? Because if you grow up with something in your environment, you're used to it being in your environment, and you don't know that perhaps it's off a bit, or there's a problem occurring.
Yeah.
So I think that question of what's average for you is a really good question, and not from a shameful judgment place, but from a place of inquiry.
Mhm.
Can I
Well,
throw like a tough wrench into the system? Is that okay?
Sure.
I get people that like any porn use at all as a symptom of an addiction or a problem, on one hand, and that there might be whatever their own personal values of it, or cultural or religious, upbringing that could be a part of that, to the other extreme where it's so ubiquitous, like it's not, it's so accessible and everybody's doing it. Like, I guess, how do we handle such a diverse, like, cross section of people we talk to, because this is such a hot button for so many people.
Well, there
Well,
is
I really liked what Jeannie was saying about because when somebody comes in and they're wondering, or they say, hey, I think my wife has pointed out that she's really upset. I've been watching pornography. I didn't think it was a big deal, but she's really upset about it. And one of the first questions is, well, when was the first time you watched? That's like a classic question, I think, in our field, is when was the first time you watched pornography? And then what was the culture in your home? Did they have magazines or videos, or were your brothers watching pornography on their phones a lot, or to get that context. So I think in a way it just raises awareness for the person to say, wow, what was I indoctrinated in? It would be the same thing, well, not the same thing, but it's whenever anybody's struggling, it's, well, what was the atmosphere that you grew up in? And can we take a closer look at that and how that influenced you?